Liliana, and welcome to this evening's episode of Life with Liliana and Friends. I'm so glad you could join us. We've been getting so much great feedback on the conversation so far, and I love that we can bring relevant topics and, help someone that's in need of, maybe some inspiration or some advice or some guidance on where you're at. And really, we're just doing this through our own stories, because stories are so powerful, and these are just stories, as you would have known for those who are following, are just stories from around me and in my life. So I wanted to say thank you to all of those who have written in, for all your wonderful comments. And I'm so thankful again that our stories can be helpful to one other person. Now this evening, I have great pleasure in sitting and having a chat with my dear husband, Mr. Edwin Warid. Thank you, my darling, for being okay with coming to sit on the show again. Now you are a celebrity, you've been very busy. So, funny thing, those around me know this, I always say, oh, I'm a celebrity, just as in a joking way. Well, when my family came on the show, they just surpassed any point of celebrity status that I wanted, and their videos have just become so popular. But we're really glad, because that shows that, it's really helping people. So Edwin had a fascinating story, and for us in our backgrounds, we're quite different in our upbringing. And so Edwin shared his story with our dear friend Margaret. So please go back and watch that if you haven't watched that, because that'll give you some context. But we also spoke to our kids, and they made us really proud. It's like we did not, we're really thankful that we've made the decisions that we did, that we've given them as much of a safe space as possible. So they've been able to articulate how they feel, the lessons they've learned. So again, if you haven't watched Melanie and Gideon, please go back and just see their insights and see how they saw things, which is quite different from what we thought. But speaking of kids, really the general theme as you listen to our story is a lot of the big decisions we made, or a lot of changes that we made in our lives, were centered around the children, because we wanted better for them. We didn't want them to be, walking the same challenges that we had, and so that they can do better and they can be better. So that's consistent, I believe, for any parent. Now, a lot of the time, no matter how much we strive to be the best parents, it doesn't always happen that way. And so we're going to focus specifically on a part of your story, because Edwin's is quite interesting. What happened is he started off as a great student academically, and then he didn't finish Form 7. He didn't pass Form 7. And so we're going to kind of explore and unpack that a little bit to understand why, in the hope that his story can help somebody else. So, Han, let's start here. You've already mentioned that you were raised in a single-parent home. Your dad was overseas. And I'm interested to understand, when we talk about academics, was it an intentional focus from the home? Like, you were such an excellent student. Is it something that was talked about often, and you were encouraged and pushed in that direction to excel there?
Yeah. My mom really, emphasized to us while growing up the importance of education. And education was really our passport, our ticket out of poverty. Yeah? So we were really encouraged to do the best that we can do in our schoolwork, so we could get good marks, resulting in good good jobs. Yeah?
Right.
So that would take us out of poverty. We would have been able to buy a house, buy a car.
Yes.
After getting a good job, which all would have been possible through a good education.
Yes.
That was something my mom really emphasized while we were growing up. Another thing that she was really particular about was our attending mass every Sunday. Eh? So no matter what, you have to go to mass, wake up and go to mass. And that kind of got ingrained in us.
Yes.
Just going to mass every Sunday.
Yes.
Whether you learn anything there or not, but you have to go.
Yes.
So that was really Interesting.
Yes, I really like that you mentioned those 2 points, because like we were just saying, I believe it's every parent's heart to want the best for for their children, not just mothers, but for parents. And for her not having not achieving a high education level, for her, she could already see that those were 2 very important things that she wanted to make sure that her children remembered and carried with them, just the education and the spiritual side of that. Isn't it interesting? It's not just a focus education, but then also the values, and just that dependence on God or honoring God.
Yeah.
So what would it look like in the home? I'm just thinking on a practical level, say maybe for those parents who are thinking, okay, that's all well and good, I talk to them all the time, but as in your home, what did it look like when you came back from school? Was there a program that you followed to make sure that was top of mind?
Yeah, my mom really made sure that when we got home from school, that we just had a quick bite and then we were to finish our homework. All the homework that we were given, we were to get that done, and then we were to concentrate on the revision. My mom really believed that the revision was what would set us apart from the other students. The more amount of time that you spent in your revision would ensure that you get good marks. And back then, revision was done in the form of cramming. So
Right.
you just cram things and you just, you know how to answer. That's fine. Even though you don't understand how to apply it practically, but as long as you know, you cram it properly, that's fine.
But that's our system, right? That's our education system, because we test that way. So it actually encourages cramming. Yes.
And most of the time, you'll find that like the cramming is not the most suitable way of learning things, especially when you come out to the workforce. It's kind of hard to cram things and then perform in your
Right.
role.
That's an interesting insight. That's so true.
Yeah, I mean, we only learn all of this in hindsight. Right?
Yes. So after your cramming session, you can go and play.
Yeah.
When you
I can go and play. Get some free time.
Yes. Can I just ask one more question about this? Because I'm very conscious, Han, that we have a lot of people that are struggling to put food on the table. We've come through COVID, and we hear these stories all the time that a lot of families are just having one meal. Kids are not able to take lunches to school. Now, you've talked about how you came out of poverty, or you were living in poverty at that time, or by our standards of poverty. Your mom wasn't working. Your sister was bringing home a very small income. So I'm interested, and when you're saying you come home and have something to eat, it almost can sound like, oh, what a luxury. They have something to eat after school and something, But what was it that your mom was able to put on the table when you came home from school?
Quite often it was just like tea and biscuit,
Yes.
Tony biscuit, like that. Was,
Tea with milk?
No milk.
No milk.
Yeah.
Sugar?
Yeah, sugar was there.
Well, sugar wasn't as expensive as it is now, for sure.
True. So it was very basic, like it
Right.
wasn't heavy, like compared to what Gideon has now.
Oh, yes.
Like, that's nothing.
Yes.
So it was very basic.
Okay, well that's good, but I like that, the importance of care. I recognize that the child is hungry, give them something to eat, and this is important. It might seem little, but it's a practical thing that we can think of. Give them a schedule, do your work, and then allow them to go out and play. When with Gideon we do, it's quite similar, isn't it? Because he comes home starving.
Yeah.
We've actually learned to cook out dinner to be ready for 3 o'clock. Because he eats so much, we thought, okay, rather than eating bread and biscuit and getting full and not eating his dinner properly, he'll eat at that time. If we're at home, we normally have our dinner at that time too. So by dinner time, we have a cup of tea. So there's a little practical tip in case it helps you. So let's just talk about that school journey. Like you going through school. So like you mentioned, you did so well academically. You had, around the highest, or if not the highest, in intermediate in your 8th year exam, and then you went up, and then Form 7 went a bit crooked. So talk us through that journey.
Yeah, I believe I started off quite well. Like class 6 and class 8, I got really good marks.
Yeah.
But things started to go down when I reached Form 3.
Right.
So Form 3, in Form 4 I was expected to get a very high A grade pass,
Yes.
which didn't happen. I just managed to get a B grade.
Yes.
And
But
then-
that was B grade, not even studying.
Yes, that was B grade, not studying. And then Form 6, Form 6 I just barely managed to scrape through. Managed to get into Form 7. I failed Form 7 horribly,
But you sat for your Form 7 exam.
I didn't sit for my Form 7 exam, but I was not even attempting it to my best ability.
Yes.
I left 2 or 3 pages out in one of the subjects.
Yes.
That was my...
Yes, I see. Man, I'm a bit quiet because I'm thinking of your mom, like how she would have been feeling seeing all of this go down that road when she was doing everything she could, in the beginning to make sure. And I think maybe I can talk to her later about that. She'll tell me the truth. Because what does she tell me? She always tells me what Edwin was doing at that time was sitting at the back of the bus with the girls, going on bus rides. That's her understanding of why his schoolwork went down the drain. So, Han, you said that around Form 3 time, that's when things started to go downhill. What was happening around that time that influenced that?
In hindsight, I could say there were 2 or 3 things that led to that. One was we moved places. We went from the Natopanga Public Rental Flat Board to the similar rental board. And then life in the rental board housing is quite tough. So going into Simla, I had to ensure that, I could fit in well there with the boys, with the crew there. And then, since we didn't have a, father figure around, I took it upon myself that it was my responsibility to, fit in with the boys and all of that for our safety.
Right.
So my younger brother and my sister, we were, all moved in together there, and I decided to hang out with the boys and ended up being introduced to volleyball and drugs and all that just to fit in.
Wow.
And being part of the crew ensured a safe pathway.
Yes. And I guess you didn't. Is it correct to say that you probably did not even think that would affect your school work in any way? You just knew you were a good student and you hang out here after school. Is that right, or you didn't expect it?
It was like, in my head, I thought I could do both.
Okay.
I could do both.
Wouldn't be a problem,
Wouldn't be a problem. And both were important. Both were equally important.
Right.
So in my head, that's how I was processing it.
Right.
I need a good education to get out of poverty. But then, while I am in that neighborhood and environment, we need to be safe.
I need to protect my family.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So that was the mindset then. I don't think I could have done it any
other way.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was happening outside of school, outside.
Yes.
And so in school there were some changes happening as well during that time?
In school I started running, so I got quite popular, and then I think Form 2, it was around Form 2 I set one of the records in the Hotoka zone. And then that kind of brought its own fame in school and all of that, the girls started to, follow you around. And some of the famous boys started to hang around you also. So my head got quite big.
Yes, so because you became a bit popular.
Yes. And I did not expect that. Right?
Yes. So what course did you run? Were you a long distance runner? Or?
No, that record was in the 100 meters. I remember the sub-junior boys. So
wow.
I don't know where that came from, but it just...
And that's unusual to have a Fijian of Indian descent in those short distances.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I can't remember when I was growing up. I know the long distance, yes.
Yeah.
But short distance, so that just...
Yeah, I mean, that was a big surprise.
Yes.
But yeah, the being famous in school and getting like one of the highest marks in the Fiji 832 around the same time. It showed to the other students that, this fellow could do, his schoolwork well, and he was also an athlete. So that makes you really famous in school, right? Especially amongst the girls. But I did not have any grounding. Like when my head started to get big like that, I didn't get any grounding at
or any kind of mentoring to kind of say, okay, listen, that's, But I wonder whether you would have listened at that age. Maybe if it was somebody you trusted.
Probably I think if it was, like my hands-on dad, like, I probably would have.
Yes.
But my mom wasn't in a very good situation at a good situation to help me in that part of life. Right?
And did you have that environment where, you could talk to her about these kind of things?
No, not really. I didn't see the importance of it because I used to be in Sharna with the boys, the crew.
Right.
So that was like, for them, for the boys too, it was like, like that kind of.
Right.
So that was another contributing factor to being accepted into the group.
Right.
This fellow is, good in his school.
So that influenced those relationships outside of school as well.
Yes.
Because of that popularity.
Yeah.
And what about Brother Barry? Wasn't he your favorite? You said. I always hear you say that name, Brother Barry.
Brother Barry was a principal at that time, one of the Columban brothers.
Yes.
Who came and did, such good work in the Catholic schools.
Yes.
So I remember he ended up suspending me for 2 weeks back in Form 2 or Form 3.
Okay.
After that, the crew that I was hanging around with had an impact in my my behavior, my attitude towards schoolwork, and all of that.
Right. And I guess I just wanted to highlight that because it just shows that there was obviously a gap there. Like there was an opportunity at that point for someone to speak some life into that situation and to just kind of like, hey, okay, can see what was happening because you were a young, impressionable young man. Like it's like, oh man, this is like the life now, not realizing. So, Han, while we're talking about advice and, voices speaking into your life, I'm interested to know when your schoolwork started to drop, what were your group of friends telling you, the ones you spent a lot of time with outside of home?
Okay, so the crew that I was hanging around with in the similar rental board, a lot of them were in and out of prison at that time. So the perspective was more, it's like whatever you are studying in school won't really come in handy when you join the workforce. It's not what you know, it was whom you know.
Right.
Like that was the mindset.
Okay.
Hanging around those boys. And it made, I don't know how it made sense to me back then.
Yes. Well, you didn't know any better.
Yeah, I didn't know any better. And I thought it's so true. Like you go and work, you don't end up using what you study at in school. So that was very distracting.
And maybe encouraging for you at that time because you're like, oh, it doesn't matter, my schoolwork going down, I'll be okay.
Yeah, but in deep inside, I knew I'm okay. I'm smart enough to be able to hack this.
Right.
To be able to just wing it. So that was my that confidence I had in my own ability, which was my weakness.
So the confidence happy and the ability was like down here.
It needed work. You need to hit those marks. You need to work.
Especially when you go up to higher forms, Yes.
So all that high marks from the intermediate and the 8th year gave me that confidence, thinking that you don't have to study that hard and all that to,
Right.
But it was not the case, as we found out later.
Yeah, so what did you find out when you finally started working, just before we move on from here? Did you find that to be true?
No, not really. The education was necessary.
Yes.
You needed the paperwork to get your foot into the door in the first place.
Right.
Without that, no one gives you a look anyway.
Yes.
You don't even get a seat to go and get interviewed.
Yes.
With that paperwork, then they, Then you
Yes.
get your one foot into the door, then you are interviewed and they check your character and all that.
Yes.
It pretty much goes on from there.
Yeah, I think so. And there is some element of relationships, like, yes, who you know, but more like from a networking relationship kind, like, so for example, if I was working in ANZ and I did work with Reserve Bank quite often, and then there was a role that came up there, they'd be like, oh yeah, that's the girl that we worked with there.
Yeah.
So it's like a who you know, but in that context, not in a nepotism kind of context.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but in the housing and in the crew, it was that
Yes.
negative one.
Yes, and I hope viewers are listening, and those younger ones, that's not a thing. And if it is happening, it is wrong, because we live in a democracy and everything is, we talk often about merit, and also there's all sorts of things like gender and all of those things that come in. So please do not be deceived. It's so important for you to work hard in school, and like Edwin said, you put it perfectly, to get your foot in the door. Because I also want to mention here, like, there's some level of there's privileged, there's some who grow up in a space of more privilege, and I didn't grow up in a rich family, but compared to Edwin, very different. But the privilege in the way that my family had connections, like networks, because my grandfather was in government, and kind of my family is known, so when they hear my surname, they're like, oh, okay. But if I had come alongside you, it'll be, so the thing that will flatten that is your paper, right? So it's like, oh, yes, we don't know who this is, but he got really good grades in here, and so that is important, to just level the playing field, I suppose, to some extent. Yeah, so you spoke about a lot of things that have happened during that time, and thank you, Han, for sharing some of the detail of your story. I wanted to just focus on some of the lessons that we can pick out of that time of your childhood. What lessons would you like to share with our viewers from your experience?
One of the most important things I remember in my childhood days was like the family unit. Like, I wish my father was around to like really have that influence in growing up. That fatherly influence.
Yes.
Because without, like, if he was there, I wouldn't have probably had to try and fit into a crew to ensure the safety of the family. And secondly, we probably wouldn't have been in the housing anyway if he was around. So the nuclear family not being full set does have an impact on the kids.
Right.
And for all those single parents out there, like, it's important to recognize that.
Yes. Would you say, before you move on to your next one, when you said, like, because some have absent fathers or mothers anyway, and right now they might be in a place where they can't do much, would you agree that it's important, if there's not a father there, that you have someone that can play that role to kind of help, Like, I think, was it when we did that Twitter space, when Jesh was hosting, he said something along the lines of, you have the father and then you have fathering. So it doesn't have to be the biological father or mother that does the fathering and mothering, but so, like, somebody maybe in the church could have performed that role. But your point is, you need to have that influence.
Have both sides,
Yes.
The importance of having both is, like, it's just priceless.
It's good.
Even if it needs to be somebody, even if it's somebody in the church, it needs to be somebody who has shown that, that they are able to build into their own children's matanga, like, not somebody who their kids are wayward and they try and build your kids.
Yes.
So there needs to be kind of a proven track record with whoever is coming into that nuclear space to help build the kids.
Yes.
And church, a lot of churches have safe spaces where there are good programs and units set up to deal with that.
Right.
So
right. So that's one lesson, just having the importance of the family unit. And if you don't have the parents there, what are some other ways or places or people that your children can get advice from? Because they don't always talk to you about everything.
Yeah.
I mean, our kids are the same.
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned church, because I really feel like that's a big role of the church,
Yes.
to fill in those gaps,
Yes.
you know, to those widows, to the fatherless.
Yes.
I mean, that's what the word says.
Yeah.
And so the church is supposed to be a place where you can be, you know, provide that guidance. And it does
Yeah.
for our children, as well.
And that's where everything starts, in
Yes.
the nuclear family. A lot of the social problems and all that we're having is just mainly because of the nuclear family has been broken down, and there's nobody
Yes.
filling in that gap.
Yes. And I think, like at a higher level, like nationally, I always feel like the family unit is the fabric of our community. And when we look around, our society is breaking down in so many ways. Morally, you know, we've got drugs, we've got trafficking, we hear of parents, you know, selling their children. And, you know, it's difficult to comprehend, but I feel like it's a breakup of that, because God's design is that the mother has a clear role, the father has a clear role, and we know anything that's designed by God works. But we face those challenges every day. I wanted to ask though, like you being somebody that did not make it through Form 7, you know, not so long, like the past couple of months, we've had the Form 6 and what do we call them now? Year 12 and year 13 exam results. And, you know, you and I were looking at some stats, and what we found was that for the year 12s, when you take into, you know, based on the figures that the Ministry of Education released, when you take into account the number that did not sit the exam, and they didn't show up at all, and the ones that failed, it comes to around over 6,500 that are just going to fall there. And whether they repeat or not, we don't know. But it must be so discouraging for them, Han. What is something that you would say to someone that's failed year 12 and year 13 and kind of like, oh my goodness, don't know what to do now?
Yeah, I mean, you know, failing is quite difficult to digest, especially when you end up failing because of things beyond your control.
Right.
You know, the situations at home,
Yes.
finance, availability of finance at home, like
Yes.
no electricity and all of that. Sometimes, you know, a lot of children fail because of this.
Yes.
But, you know, I think the biggest thing here is don't lose hope, don't give up. Like
Yes.
If you fail your Form 6 or your Form 7, don't lose hope. There's, you know, sometimes God will shut those doors in order for you to look for other doors, which is the one that He intended for you.
Yes.
So that's one lesson that, you know, I've learned when I failed. My plan was to pass the Form 6 and Form 7 properly, and then, you know, go to uni, get a job and all of that. But after failing, it just made me realize the importance of, you know, just how to hustle and do business, and you know, just being there was the importance of being sharper than the next person. So later on, in hindsight, like I realized that even people with degrees and all that end up working for people who have made it good in, you know, a particular industry which they were gifted in, which God gave them that talent to be good in.
That's a great point.
So if that opens up, if your failure opens up those doors, you know, there's something bigger at play. But your faith will be, I think, the main thing that is important there.
Yes.
You need to trust God in what He's doing.
Yes.
And it's not a way out, and it's not a go ahead to be complacent.
Yes.
But it's don't lose hope, don't give up.
Yes.
Like, you know, a lot of students end up committing suicide and
I
all of that
know.
because they fail. Like, that's the last thing. If God intended for you to fail, just open that other door. You commit suicide, you miss out on the, you know, on that reward, on that.
Yes, it's
on that
not the end of the
success.
world.
It's not the end of the world.
We don't realize that until we get older. Eh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. You know, there's a lot of people who did not pass
Yes.
Form 6 and Form 7, but yet they are owners of big companies.
Yes.
And they have people who have graduated with masters and all of that are working for
Yes.
them.
And that's a stronger story. You know, when you hear somebody, they're like, well, I didn't even pass Form 6 and yet I did this. And, you know, it's a powerful, powerful story.
Really.
Yes. So just before we move on to a few more lessons, before we finish off, I'm just thinking through, you know, where you were at, because you finished, and for the viewers after that, Edwin got a job as a teller
Yes.
at Westpac. Oh, well, first you were working with Mr. Brown.
Yes, I started off
Yes.
at PG Sugar Tribunal.
Yes.
I was a clerk there, temporary clerk.
Yes.
And while I was doing that, I decided to, you know, try and take some units
Right.
from the distance and flexible learning
Yes.
program available in USP.
Yes.
So yeah, I ended up doing that, but I was really grateful to, you know, Mr. Brown for helping
giving
me with
you that,
because I
yes.
did not have finance available
Wow.
to take those units. And
Yes.
so I think that's another hindrance too, is that we have scholarships and all that that are set up for people who
Yes.
pass with really high marks and good marks, but we don't have anything for those that fail.
Yes.
Like what are some programs that are available to those people who fail their Form 6 and Form 7? Is there a program that helps to discover what their God-given talent is, or what
Yes.
they are good at?
Yes.
Like to you know, nourish that and make
Yes.
that, bring that out for it to become into something.
Yes.
There's no support system in place for that.
Right.
So I really struggled with that. After I failed, I didn't have the finances to take any of these courses where you weren't required to pass your
Right.
Form 7. So finance was, that was a big hindrance.
Yes. I know there's also some, I've heard the government talking about the TVET and how they are thinking of, you know, trying to enforce that, the vocational studies, scholarships for those who kind of fall through there. That's a discussion for another day. But one thing that comes to mind when you're talking is like, how can we have a safety, like a net to catch those, if you like, because what you're saying is that yes, you made your mistakes. A lot of us make mistakes. We hang around with the wrong crowd, and then, you know, very academically gifted students just get distracted. But then when you go into the workplace and you start working, then you actually realize, oh man, crap, I should have worked harder. But there isn't really anything, because you said, okay, you realize, okay, maybe I should do a diploma in this, but you trying to put money aside for that is not there.
Yeah.
So what I heard you say, if I'm correct, is that if we could possibly have something for maybe even those who have been working for a little while, to have access to a fund, and plus they might be able to start paying it off sooner when they study part-time, because scholarships are mainly for those who have come out of school, and then your masters and all, you can have the overseas one. So I think you've touched on a really good point. There might be something for the next government to look at in terms of education, because there's been so much conversation about that.
There needs to be a safety net.
Yes, safety net is a great term.
And that safety net shouldn't consist of, okay, if you want to take something in a vocational course, you have to pass this and that.
Yes.
It should be brought up into consideration just by testing the students as to what they're good at.
Yes, and I remember you saying too that even though you were earning money and you might have been able to put aside some for your education, like you were supporting your family at that time. And so it's kind of like, what's more important here, to go and study or to put food on the table? In that moment, that basic need of putting food on the table will outweigh.
Yes, definitely.
So before we move into some lessons, this is the last part of the chat, so you can relax after this, honey. But I want you to share with the viewers what you did with your first paycheck. What did you buy?
For my first pay from Westpac, I ended up buying a volleyball net and a volleyball, and that was like 3/4 of my pay. And my mom was, not pleased, but the boys were really pleased. So I was part of that team, like, while I wasn't at work.
Yes.
And that was that team ensured my safety and all of that in the housing.
Yes.
And we got really close.
Yes.
So yeah.
Volleyball net, and your mom must have been like, "Are you kidding me? You're gonna go and eat that volleyball net for your dinner?"
Had some conversations around those.
So just lastly, we're still talking about lessons, and often we look to our childhood and say, "Oh, we learned this when we were children." We often refer to what happened when we were children and what we learned there. But as adults, we sometimes forget that we are still learning, and there's still lessons to be learned. We still have to unlearn things, which is what you talk about often, because you've had to unlearn so much, especially coming from that environment and living in the city, and things have been so different. So perhaps you could share with us, maybe if we think specifically about Melanie and Gideon now, our children, Melanie and Gideon, if you were to leave some specific lessons, maybe one or two even with them, of things that you've learned in your childhood, because of course what you've learned before we've been implementing to our children, but what about as an adult? What are some key things you've learned that you want to make sure you offload to them?
For Melanie and Gideon, I think it's the values, the core values.
Right.
Like that's really, in hindsight now, I realize the importance of being kind and generous.
Wow. Yes.
And just loving on, loving on your neighbors, and mostly the godly principles, how important that is in terms of the values.
Right.
Like just being loyal, being hardworking, and work smart at the same time too. These are some of the things. I realize now, these are important things that would have been passed on to me, and I would have really, valued it.
Yes.
But yeah, for Gideon and Melania, I just hope they continue to follow what's in the Bible, what's in Scripture, as to those values, the core values, the fruits of the Spirit.
Yes, that's good.
So it's already mentioned in the Bible, but a lot of times, when in the busyness of parents' lives, they forget this, and other things become the priority. It's like the priority is success, earn more money and all of that. But if you don't have those core values at the center of it, the kids can end up earning a lot of money, but not have those core values, which make them quite rotten when they grow up.
So you're saying that should be the foundation, the values.
Core values is the foundation.
Yes. And for us as parents, before you move on to maybe your last one, how do you, maybe there's something that we can leave with the parents in terms of how do you implement that? Because it's one thing, I think we have to do it by our own actions, because they need to see it playing out. We can't be telling them to be kind when we are speaking unkindly to each other as husband and wife, or to our parents. And we catch ourselves doing that still, so don't think we're perfect, but we have to display these things ourselves. So for us as a family, maybe you could share how we try and make sure that we're always bringing back the kids' attention to these values, like an intentional way of doing it in our weekly catch-ups.
Our weekly family time and family devotion time is important. So instead of just having a devotion time, I think it's nice where we've tailored it in a way now where we just sit and we just turn around. And we discuss the highlights of the week, the lowlights, of what went on, and what you did in your devotion time, what you covered, and how it was practical or applicable to what you were going through. Right?
Yes.
So that intentionally create a space where you can sit with your children and discuss this.
Yes.
And then when you are in those conversations, ensure that you are fully there.
Yes.
You're not just half there where you are on your phone and just trying to get that meeting done.
Yes.
Because most of the time you'll see the children when they're talking, there's things you can pick out from what they're talking about.
Yes.
And then if you probe a little bit more, you'll be able to get to root of what they really talking about. I think while growing up, I realized that most parents, again, due to the business and all that, they don't make that time. They don't make that space for the children to communicate clearly with them. And when they do, it's just like they're so busy doing, trying to earn money and all that whatever they are saying, the kids are saying, it's like, oh yeah, I'll talk to you later about that.
Yes.
Like they'll just repeat another couple.
Yes.
And try and visit that when it's a time convenient to them.
Yes.
But when the kids are talking at that point in time, we have to make ourselves available or set
be present.
Set a space where you are able to discuss.
Yes.
That. And you will see that when those things are coming out and you're probing a little more, you will really engage with the kids.
Yes. That's been useful for us. That's been such an important space for us. I really like that you that you mentioned the relevance of God's word, because I think that's always quite difficult. Our faith is such a big part of our lives, but sometimes we can have like just going to church on Sundays and then the rest of the week you're just behaving normally. So it's just helping even us understand that what it means when God says is, how did we portray that in our everyday? And there must be a lot of families that are having family devotions, and I just wanted to perhaps suggest that we just make sure that they are useful times, that we are not just cramming Bible verses, but we're also challenging our children to think. So how did you display this? Or but you know, when you talk about kindness, I heard you talking to your sister unkindly. You should hear Gideon talk about. He's like, I try so hard to be kind to Melania sometimes, but she's just so irritating, and that's okay. You know, let them talk like that. So one day a week might be less for some people. For us, it's the best we can do right now because our lives are also so busy. But I like, Han, that you mentioned that we can get lost in the busyness, and the children are getting lost along the way. You wanted to add something?
In that process, like when we are intentional with them, you find that they will, when they are talking, if we probe a little bit more, you'll find that there's things you can get out and like just see patterns emerging, like in their body language and all that. So if they are having problems in school, you can pretty much pick it up in those family chats.
That's right.
Because sometimes there are things going on in school they don't want to share.
Yes.
They come home, they don't want to share.
Yes.
But it will come out in a way, and if you are not paying attention 100%, you'll miss it. So that's the importance of being there,
right,
100%.
Yes.
So you can catch those things.
Yes.
And if they are being bullied in school, like and they're trying to mention it in a more, diplomatic way, you won't be able to catch it if you're not paying 100%.
Right.
attention.
Yes. And rolling right back to that point where you said in the beginning, that time that you went through.
Yeah.
If there you had that sort of space, the parents are likely to see, oh, something's here, I need to step in here, and I just need to provide some guidance in this point, because at the end of the day, the parents have the responsibility for the children, and I think too often we deflect that responsibility. The school should have taught you this, the church should have taught you this. Actually, we are the primary educators in the home. So just to wrap up this session, Han, in terms of lessons, something you mentioned when you were talking with Margaret was about the culture.
Yes.
And how that's been quite different, and I've been exposed to your culture, you've been exposed to mine, and I really like where we're at the moment, and we're still learning, but taking different pieces of each other's culture. Just in terms of lessons, is there something that you've learned from the Fijian, the Itoke culture, that you would want them to retain?
Yes, definitely. It's that inclusiveness, that again, the generosity,
right,
and just that love, that overflow of love, which leads into them being able to accommodate the extended family in such a way where the Indians find it really hard to do.
Right.
So that's something. Again, like it's one of those things which mentioned earlier, that Gideon and Melania, like the generosity, to be able to carry on into their own journey.
Yes.
Having that generosity and that love.
Yes, and I suppose the community.
They're belonging to the Vanua and all that. That's not easy to do.
Yes.
You need to have a big heart to accommodate all that.
That's not, and it's interesting because it's such a natural part of us.
Yeah.
But coming from your culture, it's like, oh my goodness, this is going to take my effort and really thinking, unlearning some things to accommodate, coming from the extended family like this to accommodate, the hundreds.
Yes.
But you've seen, I remember you commenting on the relationship with my cousins and how it's something that you're not used to, eh?
You only get better at accommodating it once you realize how the impact it has. Eh?
Right, the
It's,
value.
how valuable it is. So I was only able to accommodate it more because I saw how valuable it was. Eh?
Yes.
But again, it is a strength, but once overdone,
becomes a weakness. Yes, and that would be my lesson to them, which is almost directly opposite from yours. Is the generosity is beautiful. Accommodating those in our extended family is absolutely something we should retain, but remember that your immediate family is priority. Quite often you use this term once to me, like, you don't take food. I remember it was a soli, you remember? And Tua was asking me, and I was like, oh my goodness, I can't afford to give here. And I was like, oh, we just give it anyway, like, because I just did not want to have that difficult conversation with my dad to say, cannot afford to give $50, because Edwin really came into my life and just sorted all of our financials out years ago. But he said to me, you don't take food from your child's mouth and put it into someone else's hand or mouth. And that stuck with me because they are our responsibility first and foremost. Our bills, our commitments, our loans and all of that need to be met first before we go and soli or we go and, give to whatever, any kind of gathering or...
And that's something there's an analogy that you use about the flight. You put the mask on first before you try and
your oxygen.
Your oxygen mask.
Yes. So I love that, Han. I love that we can, and I think we should be doing more of that in our communities, in our society. I feel like when we talk about the different cultures, ethnicities in particular, it gets very sensitive in this day and age. But I like that. I feel like we need to be celebrating the differences more because we can learn so much from each other. And you and I have learned that in our own journey. You've shared a lot, honey. You've talked a lot. You've done very, very well. Well done. But thank you for making time, and thank you for just being an amazing dad. Thank you for being a great example. Thank you for loving on these two children who often drive me up the wall. Edwin's a kind like, when we plan to go to movies, like last time we went to watch, that Doctor Strange movie. And then he was saying, oh man, lucky we had to go quickly, otherwise the kids would have wanted to come. And I was like, I'm always telling him, forget the kids when we want to go on the date. You'd think they were his biological children, but this is this man's heart. And so I just wanted to thank you and honor you. And there's so many great things ahead of you, Han, and I'm so, so proud of you and thankful for your life. To our viewers, I really hope you enjoyed that. There were so many lessons we got from that. One thing, if you caught it, was just the prominence of the role of us as parents. For the children, I hope you got some encouragement from Edwin and his story. But also just these lessons that are applicable to our cultures as well, that we spoke about. And don't forget, like our journeys, we're always learning. And if you are not in a good situation at the moment, there's challenge, remember there's always going to be challenges. There will always be failures, but we have so many resources that can equip us to just stand up and keep on going and keep on going. And life is just like that. So if you're not doing okay now, and Edwin has said this before on one of the other shows, it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. So feel free to message us on the page. We can connect you to professional help if you need it, or you just need a chat. Please send us a message. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please make sure that you have followed our page, our YouTube. We're on Instagram. There's also Liliana Pareti Warid page, which is a public page of some of the behind the scenes. And we would love to share this journey with you and just offload any lessons. And if you'd like to share lessons with us, we would love to take that as well. But thank you for your time. You have a great evening. I will see you back here, 8 p.m. next week. You have a great week.
Life with Liliana and Friends.